Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicStudio.com, here with If I Could Listen to Only One Work by Composer X, it would have to be Work W. Well, the composer is Edward Elgar, and I know some of you are going to be wondering what's coming next because I have been famously on the record as saying, first of all, that England's greatest composer was not Elgar. It was certainly not. It was Arthur Sullivan. And second of all, that Elgar's greatest work is the March of the Mughal Emperors from the Crown of India Suite, something which I actually stand by. But remember, this is not a talk about what his greatest work was. It's a talk about what his most characteristic work is. And there will be many, many, many people who have things to say about that, starting with perhaps the Enigma variations. Some think his greatest orchestral work is Falstaff, God knows why. Some would say one of the symphonies. I think the Second Symphony is one of the absolute great fin de siècle romantic symphonies. The Violin Concerto, extraordinarily personal and intimate, and on the grandest possible scale. He wrote a lot of great music. He really, really did. However, the work that I have chosen that I would want to hear, if all else disappeared, if the evil god Cancresans decided to fulfill his malevolent intent and destroy classical music, but for one work by each composer, it would have to be In the South. I know some of you are going to look at me and say, what? What do you mean in the South? You must be kidding. No, In the South. Why In the South? Well, I think because it does summarize everything that makes Elgar special, and it does it in a very concise, relatively concise, it's like 22 minutes long, but in a concise way. Because I don't think Elgar was necessarily at his greatest in works in large forms, although he could do them, and do them quite well, don't get me wrong. But, his own struggles with writing like symphonies and things until he waited and was very old and never finished his third and, all that stuff. I think that's part of it. Second of all, I think that the elements that we treasure him for, that doesn't include his handling of large-scale form. I think that's important when we talk about this series of talks. We want to try and present the composer doing what they do best. Now, 22 minutes of tone poetry, which is what In the South is a very, very large form. But if it's a little bit sectional, and it is, it's okay. Because it's not called symphony or concerto. No one's telling Elgar he has to be, developmental in certain spots. He allows his imagination to run free. And the results are simply marvelous. I mean, the opening is a fabulous Richard Straussian Einheldenleben kind of soundy, big, confident, ballsy, brass-laden, imperialist screed. But it's not really imperialist because he's writing about Italy. So that's really good. You get the imperialism without the imperialisticness, if you know what I mean. Unlike the March of the Mughal Emperors, which is pure imperialism of the best possible kind, of course, because Elgar's imperialism was always high gloss. But here we've got just an extraordinarily strutting and exciting opening and beautiful lyrical secondary material. And then you have this wonderful vision of the Roman aqueducts with this striding march-like theme, which goes on maybe a little bit too long. So you get Elgar's love of endless sequences. That's part of his style too. Let's not kid ourselves. But here he puts it to really good use to make a really powerful, craggy impression. And then there's that wonderful, wonderful interlude, which is marked Canto Popolare. It's the popular song, which it really isn't, but it's by Elgar. But there's that intimacy, that sweetness, the nostalgia, this almost sad lyricism, which is also an integral element of his style. You hear it in Enigma, you hear it in all of his major works, the symphonies, but here it's all in a nice condensed little spot, which is quite wonderful and beautiful. And you have to have some of that intimacy, because that's part of who Elgar was as well. You hear a lot of it also in The Dream of Gerontius, believe it or not. You could say that, Elgar thought that was the most personal thing that he wrote. Maybe personal, but not the best, because it unfortunately has a text that makes you want to run away screaming. But So we've got that interlude and then a really abridged recapitulation that brings the whole work home with extraordinary excitement and some wonderful writing for the glockenspiel. And, there's nothing not to love about it. The end is punctual and incredibly effective. And so for that reason, I really think that this is a work that offers us, the essence of Elgar, and in a generous way. I don't want the essence of Elgar in 2 minutes. You want something that, bigness was also part of his nature. I mean, it's part of the imperialist element as well, but it was a part of his nature too. He was a romantic. It was a bigness of vision and a generosity of melody and a voluptuousness of sonority. And you want time to take all of that in as well. And so there you go. You get it. You get it in all of these different ways in this wonderfully tidy 22-minute package. It's a work whose greatness, I think, is tremendously underestimated, and whose characteristicness, which is really the important thing, is essential to this particular group of videos. Because if I have to go to the God Kankersans and say, yeah, listen to this, and all of these elements you can hear expressed in different ways, in different combinations, with a varied recipe, if you preserve all of that music for us to enjoy. And so, yeah, I'm confident that we're on the right track here. So I'm confident in selecting this work, knowing that those others will be out there for us to enjoy. Well, hopefully anyway. So thank you for joining me, friends. Keep on listening. Take care.